All right, two events remain on the World Rugby Sevens Circuit as South Africa work towards finishing amongst the top 4 nations that could head to Paris for the 2024 France Olympic Games. The Bliztboks will need a miracle after finishing joint 12th at the Singapore series and are currently 3 places outside of the qualifying spots for the Olympic Games. Let's bring in former Bliztboks player Tobela Mdaka for more on this. Good evening, Mr. Mdaka. Always great to be talking to you. Sevens Rugby. Before the Singapore series, the Blitzboks were sitting in 5th position on the log, with the top 4 teams earning automatic entry into the 2024 games in Paris. Is South Africa going to make the final cut, Tobela?
Hi, good evening to you and your viewers. It's quite sad that the Blitzboks at the moment are sitting outside the top 4. Currently lying 7th. They did have an opportunity, to rectify those issues before the Singapore tournament. So at the moment, they have a tall order to, a task. They need to make sure they get quite a lot of points or maximum points in the next 2 tournaments. I think the biggest issue at the moment is a case of they lacking a little bit of intensity. So the team does need to lift up their intensity quite a bit. The games that they're losing, they are losing some of those games, by not by big margins. For instance, they lost the group stage game against New Zealand, 12 points to 7. So which means, they are there and thereabout. The biggest difference at the moment that I can see is that all the teams that they're losing against, those teams do want it more. And that is the main difference. They want to win more. They've got the hunger. They've got the drive. So those are the basics we need to get back and implement to make sure that we do come through, in the next tournament or 2. Outside that, yes, there has been a lot of injuries as well. But the team does need, they do need to lift. They've got a lot of players perhaps back home with a great structure at Stellenbosch University.
I still don't think it's clear what is at the root cause of the problem with the Springbok Sevens. Tobela, maybe you might answer throughout this interview. My question now is, how important is it for Coach Sandile Ngcobo to manage player workload, as only 9 fit players could take to the field at the weekend? And he said that some key players and decision makers were missing. And that's, of course, because they were nursing their injuries on the sideline. How important is squad depth also in this conversation, Tobela?
Squad depth is extremely important. I think that's where we're currently failing. But if you go back, I think since the beginning of the year, we have had players injured almost every single tournament. Sooner or later, but by the looks of things now, we are really running thin on depth. I think Coach Sandile Ngcobo needs to go back, look at which players are fit, which players can you try and fast track, to get fit for the next 2 tournaments. The next 2 tournaments, like we said, are very critical. We don't want to be starting, new caps at those tournaments. You want to bring in, the experienced players. So more than anything, he's going to try and push for his experienced players to get fit as quick as possible, and perhaps look at, which other players outside the current squad he has are ready and willing to take on the task.
You spoke about the nations that we lost to. I mean, losing to Spain for the very first time in our history just speaks to the severity of the 2022-23 season that the Bliztboks encountered this year, does it not? Where can you see the immediate changes just so that this doesn't happen again in the new season?
I think that there was a lot of pressure also on the coaches coming into the series, taking over someone like Paul Chu, and Neil Powell, who had done a tremendous job with the team. So there was a lot of pressure on the coach, Sandile Ngcobo, to make sure that the players he has, he makes sure that he uses those players properly and adequately. And, the one thing he needs to do now to make sure that we do qualify and not lose quite a lot of momentum going into, the last 2 tournaments is making sure that the players understand their basics, Like I said, they are lacking quite a lot of intensity at the moment, which for me is quite the key area. They do need to lift intensity when it comes into their tackles. They need to lift intensity when they come into the rucks. And, even ball carrying, you lift all of those small things intensity-wise. It's going to make a big difference for the side. The Blitzboks side over the past 6 years or so has been very stellar on defense. And at the moment, that's the one thing they're currently lacking. The attack has always been there, but also the intensity in the attack has lacked quite a lot in the past few tournaments. But like we said, it is a lot on the injuries. They do need to make sure that their player management is on point and rest the players that need resting, and make sure that by the time the Paris and London tournaments are get in place, those players who are injured are willing and ready.
Well, speaking about the importance of those two events and those series that will close off the 2022-23 season, you've participated at the Olympic Games. How devastating would it be for the Blitzboks to not make the final cut to France 2024 ahead of the Olympic Games?
Oh, that would be quite devastating, and I think as much as it is a reality, it's something I haven't quite digested as yet. I think as a country, as a rugby playing nation, it's not something we would want to not make. It would be devastating for the coaches and for the players. And, it would take a lot for them to almost bounce back and, show that we do deserve to be in the top 4 in the world. As in the past, I think even the top 4 is quite a bit of a stretch. We need to make sure we're in the top 2, top 3 consistently year in, year out.
All right, before your closing remarks regarding the Bliztboks, is it fair for the rugby fraternity to still compare Sandile Ngcobo to Neil Powell? So this conversation is more based on the post-Neil Powell era. Should we not give the new coach more time to spend with the team before we can see some results that are more productive, Tobela?
It's always the case with all coaches that come in. There's always the pressure, especially if, the outgoing coach left some good structures and good grounds, to go from. So Sandile does need a little bit more time. I think the pressure he has now more than anything is that he got the team perhaps with a year to go before the Olympics. So he could say as well, that wasn't enough time. He needed another year, maybe 2 full years to bring up a squad, to create the depth, to bring a group of players to Stellenbosch, the types of players that he wants to use. Because if anything now, he has been, working on a group of players that were also selected by Neil Powell. So that I think at the moment he does need to create his own structures as well, look at different options of what he can use, and make sure that the depth of players he does pick is the correct type of players that he wants to use going forward.
I have to jump in there. Thank you very much, Tobela. We have run out of time. Former Bliztboks Sevens player Tobela Mdaka on the Blitzboks final meets of the season ahead of the important Paris 2024 Olympic Games. That's